Hey, this is Scott Spears, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Scott Spears Now. And we've got a big event coming up here in Marion right around the corner, and a big guest with us here to discuss that event, because he will be there, as well as many other things in his life. The event is the 19th annual A Night at Heritage Hall, hosted by the Marion County Historical Society on Saturday, March the 29th, from 5 to 8 p.m. Tickets are available at the door for just $8. For more information, call the Marion County Historical Society at 740-387-4255. Joining us today is a man who will be there that night taking questions and visiting with everybody, the 29th President of the United States, Warren G. Harding. President Harding, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm glad I could be here today. It's always great to come back home and be with some friendly faces in Marion. I will not be at the night at the museum.
Is that right?
That's right. Now Florence is going to be there.
Oh, okay.
She'll be ready to go. But I have an engagement with the Senate. I'll have to be back in Washington, and had to decline this time. But we'll catch it maybe the next year. Those are always fun events, though.
They are. Though, at past events, for people who might not have been, what's it like? Your desk is there from your years at the Marion Star?
Well, the museum has recreated a Marion Star office, so it's what my editor's office might have looked like. It's my actual desk from the Star, and there are lots of other photos and memorabilia around there, and so it's a good place for talking points when somebody comes in and, "Hi, Mr. President," and then they don't know what to say. Hey, let me show you something. So there's always something that over here. Here's a picture of me with Henry Ford and Thomas Edison, and over here is Florence in her inaugural ball gown that she didn't get to wear because there was not an inaugural ball. I wasn't going to have it. So there are lots of things to talk about. So it's always fun to strike up a conversation with folks coming through. They've got flashlights, lots of kids. Of course, you put kids and flashlights together, you've got something.
You've got something. Now, President Harding, what is your, what's the favorite part of your life that you like to talk about? We have your presidency, your years in the Senate. We have your childhood, your years at the Marion Star. Those are big points. What is most interesting to you?
Well, it's been an interesting life. So this is a non-answer to your question, but it's all good. I've had many different facets of my life, different chapters. Surprising how one thing leads into another. I never would have predicted that politics would have been in my future when I started out in journalism and as a young newspaper owner. Never would have predicted it would veer off toward politics, but it did, and a wonderful chapter it was. I had a fabulous childhood. I was born in 1865, November 2nd, or right at the end of the Civil War. And it was a time of great change in the country. I started out life in rural mode. I was born and spent my earlier years in Blooming Grove on the family farm, which had come down through generations. Little story there. The town originally was called Corsica. It was called Corsica when I was born. But that's the time that the U.S. Post Service was starting to come together and open up post offices around the country. And they were going to open a post office in Corsica, except that it turns out there's another town in Ohio with that name, Corsica. Well, you can't have two Corsica, Ohio's, it's according to the post office. So the name of the town was going to need to change. Now, we thought the town should change its name to Harding Corners because my family laid out the little village. If you go to the cemetery and start looking at the names on the stones, it's Harding, 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 going way back. So Harding's Corners didn't make it though for other reasons. I think some other non-Hardings in the community were not pleased at that. So Blooming Grove it was. So my early years were in Blooming Grove, having the kind of childhood a kid would have in 1870s, 1880s. A lot of baseball, a lot of farm chores, taking care of the chickens, baling hay, going out with my father and mother on doctor's calls. My father was a homeopathic physician. He went to school up in Cleveland. In fact, my mother joined him in the practice. Later, she also went to school to become a midwife. So that his and her combination worked out really well for family medicine in rural Morrow County, which, although earlier that actually was in Richland County. There was no Morrow County. There was Richland County and Marion County came together. And the state legislature said, no, those counties are too big. We're going to fix that. And they took a chunk out of Marion County and they took a chunk out of Richland County and mashed them together, and Morrow County it was. And that's where Blooming Grove was located. So it was a wonderful childhood. We had there's something that happened in my childhood that would come back to haunt me years later in politics. We had a hen house on the farm. Of course, a lot of farms did. We raised our own eggs and sold a few. And there were some neighborhood kids that were stealing eggs from the hen house. Well, my grandfather caught them and turned them into their parents, and they all got a good whooping. But to get even, they started spreading rumors in the village that the Harding family had black descendants. This was not a good thing to attach to your name in that time. It just seemed like a harmless kid prank. But as we'll discuss later, it came back with a vengeance when my career in politics started to gain some traction. I was the oldest of 8 kids, lots of brothers and sisters. I lost 2 of them, Charles and Priscilla, on the same day. Charles was 6, Priscilla was 5, and they both died on the same day of jaundice. And my mother was scared to death that whatever it was at the time was going to wipe out the family. It didn't, but sure missed that brother and sister. Family moved to Caledonia. Caledonia was coming on as kind of a Marion County boomtown. In fact, there was even talk, as Caledonia was growing and getting some momentum, there was talk that Caledonia might become the county seat of Marion. Well, that didn't come to pass, but it was probably nothing more than wishful thinking on the part of Caledonians. But nonetheless, Caledonia was growing, and my father, wanting to grow the medical practice, wanted to go where the people were. So he moved the family to Caledonia, and where I went to the local school in Caledonia until I was 14. And that's when you got up to the 8th grade. That was it. That was your public education. And I started going to college in 1882 at the age of 14. And now people today think that, oh, he must have been some kind of boy genius. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. It's just if you were going to start any kind of school after public school, whether it was a full-fledged college or a teacher's normal school or whatever it would be, you started that at about age 14. So I went to Ohio Central College in Iberia. When you look at the little village of Iberia now, it's hard to imagine that there actually was a college there. Not that it was a big institution. It wasn't the Ohio State University. It was a small school. And it was what they call a normal school, a normal college. I'm not sure what normal means actually, but the gist of it was that if you wanted to become a teacher, you went to a school to do that. And so there were small colleges throughout Ohio where you could study to be a teacher. And I thought that's probably what I was going to do. I had a good friend by the name of Jack Warwick that I went to school with. And between the two of us, we started a little newspaper. That's probably too grand of a name to give it. It was just a pamphlet that housewives used to line the shelves in the cupboard. But we called it the Iberia Spectator, and it was just packed with Iberia news at the time of comings and goings and who was visiting from Waukegan, Illinois, and whatever happened to Aunt Martha, and everything that Iberians wanted to know. So that got me through my growing up years in Caledonia and so forth, and so that was one chapter of my life.
It's very interesting. You talked about the rumor of you having African American black descendants. When did this come back to haunt you, and how?
Well, it happened when I was nominated for the presidency. I was the Republican nominee coming out of the 1920 Republican National Convention in Chicago. And there was a professor from the College of Worcester that wrote a paper. It later became a small book about the ancestry of Warren G. Harding. And according to him, I had a great-great-grandmother on my father's side that was African American. Now, nothing could be further from the truth. I have my family genealogy going all the way back to when my ancestors got off the boat, and there is no black ancestry there. But this was a fabrication. It was, I think, the professor was given a stipend by the Democratic Party, which motivated him to cook up a piece of fiction. It started out as a academic paper. It later became a small book. But because there was no truth to it, the U.S. Postal Service went after it. Anytime it was mailed, it was considered mail fraud because it was considered to be a fraudulent document. So the U.S. Postal Inspectors went after the professor, went after the printing company that printed it in Cincinnati, found the printing plates on the printing press that was used to print it and destroyed those and confiscated as many of the copies of that book as could be found. Now, there are still copies of it around, and historians have some fun with that, especially Democratic historians. But it created confusion in the campaign, and it created doubt where there shouldn't have been any doubt.
Now, the Marion Star years, you talked about the newspaper in Iberia. How did we get to the Marion Star? Because that's a big story for so many people.
Well, yeah, it's a proud chapter of my life. That's one of the things I feel best about. Let me veer off for a moment before I answer that question directly. And I really got off on some false starts. I thought I wanted to be a teacher. So I took a position as a teacher in a one-room school in Marion County. It was a one-room school, a little white frame schoolhouse at the corner of Marion Williamsport Road and Route 4 on the north side of town, where WMRN is today. But that one-room schoolhouse stood right on the corner, and after being responsible for K through 8 for a year, I had decided that was the most miserable, godforsaken, thankless job that anybody would ever have, especially for the measly pittance that they paid. And I said, this is not for me. The academics of it were fine. It was just trying to ride herd on unruly kids that age. It wasn't for me. So when I was going to school, I painted houses and did all kinds of little odd jobs. So I was used to hard work. My father wanted me to study law. And back then, you didn't go to law school. There were very few law schools. And if you wanted to become a lawyer, you would do what they called read law, meaning you apprenticed with a local lawyer and spent a lot of your time reading law books. And so I did that. I read law and apprenticed with a local attorney, and that was the most boring thing I could ever have done. How can somebody devote a career to this? It's just minutia, detail. Trying to draw connections of legal precedent between this decision and that decision, and trying to connect the dots. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a puzzle that has no answer. I didn't see the point. All right, so that's teaching. That's gone. Let's try law. No, that's not it. Tried insurance. We're going to try selling insurance. And so I got on with a fella that was selling life insurance, and learned the trade. And so he turned me loose on my own to sell some life insurance policies, and I did. As anybody who knows me knows, I'm a people person, and I get along with everybody, and it's easy to strike up a conversation with me. And so there was a certain salesman aspect to what I was doing that I thought, I can do this. Except that when I sold the policies, I did the math wrong. When you're figuring out the actuarial tables on how long somebody probably will live, and then how many years they pay into it, and there are formulas for all of that. Except I calculated it wrong and wrote policies that the insurance company was going to lose money on. So I I don't know. I don't know if I was fired or I quit, but we had a mutual agreement that this wasn't my future. Now, about this time, there was going to be a sheriff's auction in Marion. There was a little newspaper. It's called the Marion Daily Pebble that had been published for 6 or 7 years, that had just recently changed its name to Marion Star. And it was not doing well. It had failed to make the payments on the loan, and it was going bankrupt. The Marion County Sheriff was taking control of the assets, what they were, of this little publication, and was going to have a public auction. Well, got to thinking back, some of the most fun that I'd had was writing for the Iberia Spectator, and I also had a job in Caledonia for the local newspaper, the Caledonia Argus. And I didn't do any writing for them, but I was a printer's devil, meaning I set the type and would set the lines of type on the printing press and get the press run so it could run off copies. And I got ink under my fingernails, and once you get ink under your fingernails, it never comes out, So my friend Jack Warwick and I got together, saw this auction coming up, and thought, let's see what we can do. So I borrowed $100 from my father. He did the same with his dad, and we had a little bit of money between us. And we bought that newspaper, the Marion Star, for $300 at a sheriff's auction. So all of a sudden, I was in the newspaper business with my partner, Jack Warwick. Publishing the Marion Star at 3 cents a copy. Now, the paper didn't get off to a good start. It wasn't going well when we bought it, and it wasn't going well for some time after Jack and I bought it. We tried everything. One of the things that worked was publishing the train schedules. Marion was growing faster than Caledonia even, and it really was a boom era for Marion. Marion had 5 railroads, and there were 5 different railroad depots in Marion. That's a whole nother story. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But I published the train schedules in the paper, but rather than charge the railroads for the value of that advertising, I charged a little bit, but I took most of the value of that advertising as railroad passes, which gave me the opportunity to ride the train at no charge anywhere those rail lines went, which was most of the Midwest. That was a pivotal thing, and it actually was one of the things that veered my career off toward politics years later. But the Star grew. We were publishing news that folks were interested in. I think I have a little clip here that would tell you some idea of the kinds of news that we were covering. Since my father was a physician, I kept in touch with his peers, and because physicians a lot of times had good stories to tell of things that went on. This was one. There was some medical news. Mrs. Dowell of Greencamp underwent the horrible operation of ovariotomy yesterday. Notwithstanding, the operation was beset with the usual dangers and difficulties at almost every stage, so much so that the attending physicians twice thought she would not survive it. She came out of it well beyond all expectation and still continues to do so, as announced by telegram at 9 o'clock this morning, 19 hours after the operation. The tumor weighed 47 pounds and some ounces, which is pretty good size for a woman only 4 feet 8 inches high. So
47-pound tumor.
47-pound tumor. Well, that's the kind of thing that captures the interest of people in Marion, Ohio. And, comings and goings and medical news and political news. And one of the other things that started to gain some traction is I realized that the Marion Star gave me a forum. It gave me a platform as the co-owner and publisher of the paper. I wrote a lot of the stories. Jack Warwick wrote a lot of the stories. But I could also write editorials. And in a newspaper, editorials differ from the news. The news is the news. It's the facts. This is it. This is no embellishments. This is what happened. In an editorial, we can give our opinion. And the opinion of the owner of the paper, the opinion of the editor. And so whatever is on the editor's mind is fodder for a half-page editorial in the paper. So there was at least one a week. These would be things that I thought would interest Marion, but I learned later on that I could use those editorials as a way to, and this sounds highfalutin, I could use it to shape public opinion. Meaning, if I had an idea, I saw something in town that needed attention, or something that would improve the community. I felt that part of my role as a newspaper editor in a growing town the size of Marion was to be a booster for the community, to help lift up the town and help it realize its potential. One of the things I wrote about was the mud streets. I mean, the streets of Marion were dirt, and in the spring were mud. And when you were bringing your horse and carriage through town, it would be axle deep in mud at the corner of Center and Main Street. And then later on, when automobiles are starting to be seen, it wasn't such a rarity. You'd see Model Ts stuck up to their axles in the mud with a team of horses trying to pull it out. And here we've got, Marion's a growing, bustling, starting to become an industrial community, and we've got mud streets. Well, this is ridiculous. And we look to other towns our size over toward Mansfield and Lima, and even Delaware, that had brick streets. And there's no reason Marion should be like this. So I wrote editorials about the need for paved streets in Marion. And before long, the mayor and the commissioners got behind it and thought, and started to consider, we'd have to assess property owners for that, but the general consensus was that'd be a good thing. So Marion started laying brick streets. And so it was with any number of things, like a water plant, running water. There's an idea. You don't have to go out to your backyard and pump the handle. Or sometimes you had it in your kitchen. You could pump the handle. There were any number of things like electric lines, for the city of Marion. Electricity was starting to become a thing. Sidewalks. Kids were having to walk to school in the mud because there were no sidewalks. So as we could lift those things up through editorials and people get behind it, and I saw the difference that kind of journalism could make in a growing town the size of Marion.
We do want to let people know again, the 19th annual United Heritage Hall, hosted by the Marion County Historical Society, is coming up on Saturday, March the 29th, 5 to 8 p.m. Tickets are available at the door for just $8. For more information, call 740-387-4255. The 29th President of the United States, Warren Harding's going to stay with us, and we're going to have a guest join us momentarily. Now, we certainly have history here as the episode continues. We started off joined by the 29th President of the United States, Warren G. Harding, the length that people will go to be on this program. We certainly appreciate. And now joined by one of our favorite people, the 40th Treasurer of the United States, Mary Ellen Withrow. Mary Ellen, so good to see you.
Yes, it's always good to be here.
Always good to have you
Yes.
here. We do want to let people know the 19th annual A Night at Heritage Hall, hosted by the Marion County Historical Society, is coming up on Saturday, March the 29th from 5 until 8 p.m. Tickets are available at the door for just $8. For more information, call the Marion County Historical Society at 740-387-4255. President Harding is busy with the Senate that night, but Mrs. Harding will be there showing some personal items of yours, the very interesting section of the museum. And Mary Ellen, your museum is housed in the Marion County Historical Society right across from President Harding's, and you'll be there that night taking people through the museum.
I'll be in my museum.
You'll be in the museum,
Yeah.
yes.
I don't travel through the museum. I just stay in my museum.
In your part.
Yeah.
Yes. For people who haven't been there, what do people gravitate toward in your museum?
Well, the dress always catches their attention, but I try to point out the Guinness Book of Records to them, and the $20 bill I gave John Glenn when he went up in space. Those are two of the most important things.
You know, it's interesting, Mary Ellen, you talk about the dress. The dress is there. It's the dress that you wore when you were sworn in back in 1994. And President Harding was talking earlier about the dress that Florence was going to wear to the inauguration, which didn't end up happening, the inauguration ball. Why are clothes so important, do you think, President Harding? People like to look at the clothes.
Well, sure they do. I mean, there are clothing museums that are just dedicated to textiles and different styles, and our clothing is part of what we are. It makes a statement about us. It makes a statement about the era that we're from. It makes a statement about our aspirations. It's dressing for the part. Dresses have stories. You know.
Well, do we know the story behind Florence's inauguration dress?
Well, there's a grand tradition of elaborate inaugurations in Washington. Woodrow Wilson had one that was legendary. So the expectation was that the Hardings would do the same. The only problem with that is I'm a fiscal conservative, and the idea of spending untold sums on a lavish party for the poobahs of Washington with bands and banquets and orchestras and dances and lavish decorations, that just flies in the face of everything that Warren G. Harding stands for as far as fiscal responsibility. I was a strong proponent of a balanced federal budget. We have one now. We didn't before. I just hope that future generations can maintain the balance of a federal budget. It takes a lot of discipline to do that, but not having the inaugural ball was a symbolic step in that goal. But I can tell you, Florence wasn't happy.
She didn't get to wear the dress. No. But now it ends up in the museum.
It does.
So people get to talk about it. Mary Ellen, for people who do have interest, how did you pick the clothes you were going to wear that day, swearing-in day?
Well, I had a certain brand that I always buy because it doesn't wrinkle, and it was one of those. Yeah.
Did you ever dream all these years later, 30 plus years later, that it'd be hanging in a museum when you wore it that day?
No, not at all. And my inauguration was at Treasury, and we had a huge crowd. We didn't have a dance, but we had a lot of fun. And we had a reception across the street at the Hotel Washington on the top floor. and it started to snow, and it got very serious about snowing, and everybody decided maybe they better start home. So that's sort of the way my inauguration was.
Because so many people came from Marion, and that's
did.
quite a trek to D.C. by car.
And then we had all the other state treasurers were there too.
And Vice President Gore swore you in. Now, I don't know that we've ever covered that part of it. How was it that you wanted Gore to swear you in? That's correct, right?
Yes, because he was my choice, yeah.
And he came and swore you in, and there it is forever.
Yes.
Yeah. When you see pictures from that day now, what does it make you think about?
Oh, what a fun day it was. It was fun, yeah. And I was, surprised at how many people were there. That surprised me.
President Harding, you were talking about the Marion Star in the editorials, how this was gaining popularity and helping the Star become a success. What do you think, and when do you think the Marion Star became a success in your eyes?
Well, I think journalistically, I thought we turned the corner fairly early as far as covering the news that Marion wanted. Now, you got to understand, how did you buy a newspaper then? Well, you walked into the Marion Star office, and there were several different locations where we moved from building to building until we ended up in our more permanent location on Center Street. But you'd walk in, put down your 2 or 3 cents, inflation, and walk out with a copy. Now, my wife Florence, shrewd business lady. I owe that to her growing up in her father Amos's hardware store. Amos Kling's Hardware on Main Street downtown, a successful hardware store. Actually gained some notoriety in a good way and grew the business by selling supplies to the Union soldiers during the Civil War. But ran a very successful hardware business in town and also became a property owner and landlord in town. And Florence would ride horseback around town to collect the rent on her father's properties. She also worked in the store and also kept the as she got a little bit older, kept the books for the store. So she had a very sharp business lady, and she was looking around Marion and realizing how many things came to people's homes. There was a man who drove around town that had an egg route, delivered eggs to people's houses. And there was a milk and cream route. There was an ice route for people who had ice boxes at home. You get 50 pounds of block of ice for your refrigerator. There was a cleaner that would go around and gather up laundry and take it and do it and then deliver it. But a newspaper, he had to go to the newspaper office to get it. Florence thought, why can't the newspaper just be delivered to people's homes? And interestingly enough, that's something that just wasn't done. It was an innovation at the time. So what she did was went out and hired schoolboys and taught them what needed to be done. We kept the books of who gets what paper and when, and did they just get one a week, or did they subscribe to the daily, or they kept the money and all of that. It was really a lot of responsibility for a child. Some of them didn't do that well at it, and Florence is famous for paddling the ones that were not up to snuff.
She could be a rough lady.
It was she was fair. she was, but she had a rough streak. Discipline was important to her. But that's when the Star turned the corner financially. When the money was coming in, and we didn't have to account with it coming over the counter at the at the Star. It was a big day when we installed a counter with a cash register at the Star. Because up to that point we just kept the money in a cigar box. The cash register didn't really help, but it gave people the impression that there's commerce happening here, that there's money is changing hands. When in reality, the cash drawer was mostly full of collar buttons until we got a little more cash flow going.
And again, we should mention the desk that you sat at the Marion Star.
That very desk is it's an interesting desk. When you see it, it's got interesting little drawers. Some of them that are hinged. They don't slide out. They open up kind of sideways. So look at it when you get there.
And there's some paper with your signature on it under there.
There is.
Now, speaking of signatures, Mary Ellen, as you said, you are in the Guinness Book of World Records for signing more currency than anybody on planet Earth.
Yes.
For people who are interested, how did that come to be?
Well, it was a year where the century changed, and we were very concerned about the situation with people and their money, whether they would be concerned about what's going to happen with their money over the turn of the century. And so, and also, the President Clinton had a very successful situation in the White House with the balancing the budget and taking good care of the money. And so all of that involved my ending up having my signature on more currency than anyone in history.
What does that mean to you? Because that, as you say, is so fascinating. When we went around to the schools last year, when people find that out, they want your signature, they want your autograph. What does that mean to you personally? It means so much to so many others.
Well, I'm very proud of the Guinness Book of Records. Not everybody has that.
No, very few.
And besides that, the president balanced the budget, which I was very proud of too.
President Clinton.
Yes.
When you were there.
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted to ask you, Mary Ellen, it's an interesting story. They had to get the signature that was going to be on the money.
Mm-hmm.
How did it had to be done in a quick fashion? Why did it have to be done so quick, and how did the signature that appears on all the money come to be?
Well, my predecessor went to prison, and they were very anxious to get her name off of the money, and it takes 6 weeks to do a signature. And so they brought the paper and pen out to the airport. I was at Washington Airport ready to go back home. And I was to sign my name 20 times. And I went over and I was trying to sign it where I was sitting. And then everybody was bumping me. It was very crowded. So I went over and I was underneath the telephones trying to sign over there, and I was really getting bumped over there. And I finally went back in one of the rooms and signed my name, and I marked number 12 as the one I wanted. And so that's the story.
Number 12 of 20, and this was done in the Columbus Airport.
No, this was done in the Washington. In the USA terminal.
Okay.
Yeah.
So number 12 is on the money. What about number 12 appealed to you?
Well, they were all pretty good.
And they still are. And they still are.
Yes. I just signed my name today for somebody, and he said, well, that looks just like it. I said, good.
Yep. It hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. So what? Just number 12 was the best looking to you at that time?
Yes.
What was important about you with that signature?
Oh, I tell you, it had, as far as I was concerned, it had to look good.
Yeah.
And when Larry Summers did his signature, We waited for the money to come out with his name on it, and it didn't come out, and it didn't come out. I said, what happened to Larry's money? And they said, well, he wants to do his signature over. And so we had to go through the signature ceremony again. And he was happy with that one.
And he was the third Secretary of Treasury you
Yes.
worked on. And we're seeing him a lot lately on the news.
Yes.
He's appeared again.
Yes.
He's out there giving
I
his
know,
opinion.
you mentioned that.
I did. I saw
Yeah.
him last week. Now, I'm going to come to President Harding after Mary Ellen, but I want to get both of your stories on how you got into politics. Mary Ellen, yours starts 1969.
Mm-hmm.
No women on the Elgin School Board.
Right.
How did this all come to be?
Well, 2 women teachers came to see me one day and wanted me to run for school board. And, of course, there were no women on the school board, as you said. And I had never, ever thought of running for office. It never entered my mind because it just wasn't anything I ever thought I would do. But I loved politics. I did. I was always very involved in what was going on. And so I thought about it and decided to do it. I ran against 5 men, and that's the story.
It ended well.
It ended, yeah, I ran better than any of the men, yes.
Mary Ellen, school board, a lot of people feel is a lot different than, let's say, treasurer of Marion County.
Mm-hmm.
So why did you decide? A lot of people stop with school board. They serve out their term,
yeah.
and then they go and they're back to a parent or whatever they're doing in life. Why, once you started that, did you keep on going?
Yes, most people stop with that.
Right.
Well, I kept on going because I became fascinated with running for office. It was, I really enjoyed it. And that's why I decided to run for clerk of courts. The people in the Democratic Party asked me to run. And so I decided to run, and that did not turn out well. And
The only election that you didn't win.
Yes, and I know why I didn't win. I wasn't supposed to be clerk of courts.
That's right. You ended up in the right position.
Yes, I did. Oh, yes, I loved it where I was then, yeah.
So you really just liked running. You liked...
I did, yes. I did enjoy running. I loved meeting people and traveling all over. And, you had to get used to it. I didn't start out knowing exactly what to do. I mean, you get into the routine of it, and you love talking to people, and they would give you ideas, and sometimes I would think they were ridiculous, and sometimes I'd think they were terrific,
Mary Ellen, after you were in, I want to come to President Harding on how he got into politics in a second, but I was thinking the other night after we talked, because there was this great conversation about, in the current time, 2025, do you have to be a provocateur to get attention? If you just sit and do the normal political things, do people pay you any attention? And it seems like they don't anymore right now. You've got to do something out of the ordinary. And I got to thinking about Marion, Ohio after we had that conversation. And obviously the 2 most successful politicians in Marion County history are sitting right here with me. And I got to thinking about that. And it's interesting, Mary Ellen, you told the story a few years ago when we were at the Marion County Fair that you had challenged Buck Reinhardt to be in the demolition derby.
Yes.
And, you wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Now, that's provocative to get attention at the time. Yeah.
I thought I could take care of
You
it.
could take him out right there at the demolition derby. So that's interesting. And then I got to thinking about the recipe cards, because when you did that in the 70s, this was not something people were doing. That was a unique idea to get different attention because people kept recipe cards in those days. So that was a provocative thing that worked.
Yeah, Bucky Reinhardt laughed about that. He said that's ridiculous, passing out recipes. I said, people save recipes.
And he didn't win.
No.
So the joke was on him in the end.
Yeah.
And then I got thinking about President Harding. President Harding brought the Chicago Cubs. That's why we have Take Me Out to the Ball Game here.
Right.
Brought the Chicago Cubs to Marion. Total publicity stunt. You threw out the first pitch in the game.
Right.
Provocateur. You got a little of that in you. Tell that story quickly, President Hart, before we get to your start in politics.
Right. Well, when you own a newspaper, you're already a provocateur. You may be publishing controversial editorials. Your name is out there every day. Your name's on the masthead of the newspaper. You really become a well-known public figure, whether you're controversial or not. Certainly, everybody knows who you are. And when we started the campaign, we had to do it quickly because there were just a matter of months from the time that I was selected as a Republican candidate until the election. And it's very similar to the circumstances that we had just this year in this most recent election. There wasn't time to gear up a campaign. We had to hit the ground running. So we brought in a famous advertising man, Albert Lasker from Chicago. He's the guy that made Wrigley gum so popular, and you remember puffed wheat shot from guns. That campaign. That was one of his. And he said, "I'm going to sell Warren Harding like a pack of gum," and he did, and pulled out every possible publicity stunt that you could do in 1920, including bringing some of the famous movie stars of the era, Mary Pickford, Al Jolson, into Marion. These people had star power even at that time. And the Chicago Cubs, well, that happened in part because Albert Lasker was a co-owner of the Cubs, so that wasn't,
that helps.
That was an easy ask for him, But those are the types of things. We'd had everything I did was filmed and released to the theaters for newsreels that started in advance of every movie showing. Warren G. Harding was everywhere.
So they came, and now this is the field. Is this the field that is still in Lincoln Park, where you played? Yes. So that's the field.
That's the field.
That's the field where it all happened, and you threw the opening pitch.
I did.
And do you remember? Was it a ball strike? Or was it just the inaugural?
Was
it one of those
the inaugural
first
softball?
pitch?
Yeah.
Plus, also, when you think about it, the front porch speech, that's a little provocative. That was, although you took that from another president,
I did.
Yes.
That came from President McKinley.
Yeah.
It's. I don't know that it's a brilliant strategy, but it's what you do when you're running a campaign on the cheap.
Mary Ellen, you threw out a first pitch at one point, didn't you? At a baseball game?
No, but I do want to mention I took over the License Bureau just so I could get my name known. You remember that?
Yes.
That was quite an operation. I did that for 3 years, and then I was very successful getting elected as county treasurer. Because I said everything that goes out of the License Bureau has my name on it, so it was a good thing to do.
It's interesting. In our first half hour with President Harding, he was talking about some of the things that were used against him when he was campaigning for office. Other people want to win. And you had talked about Buck Reinhardt making fun of your recipe cards, which obviously turned out to be well. But one of the greatest stories, and I think we told it at certain times when we went around to the schools, was when you ran, I believe it was for Marion County Treasurer, they said because you were a woman, you couldn't open the vault.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, people actually campaigned on that.
Yes.
And then there was a day where, wasn't there a cleaning woman who came in?
Yes, and washed down the front of the vault and froze the tumblers. But I could open the vault otherwise.
Yeah, right, it was normal day you could open the vault.
But that day I couldn't open the vault. We got a big kick out of that.
So, but that's what people do in the midst of a political campaign. How do you get past that?
Well, when I ran for clerk of courts, what they said about me was I didn't have time to do that. I had 4 children. And the woman I'm running against, Margaret Hauser, didn't have any children. She wasn't married. And so that was she doesn't have time to do this. Norman said, well, she wouldn't be home anyway. Which is probably true. Yeah.
Well, when you think back on that now, it is very interesting. I mean, these were all very female-oriented shots that were taken at you.
Yeah.
Recipe cards, can't open the vault because you're a female, because the mother's supposed to take care of the kids. A father who had 4 kids wouldn't be...
No.
That wouldn't be dumped on him.
No.
So when that's getting dumped on you, I mean, do you think, gee whiz, where are we?
Well, I do remember when we had to both speak at the one of the events here in Marion. They sat us side by side, which is not a very happy thing to do.
You and the person you were running against?
Yeah, Margaret Hauser and I.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was very irritated at that, and but you have to get over things like that.
You do?
Yeah, I mean, but it was, and then the person that walked in with her had been a kind of a good friend of mine.
Oh no! Who would come in?
You know how it is.
It is. Yeah, you just have to deal with those things.
Yeah,
Don't you? Put them. Maybe I was thinking of Pete Rose in the first. Oh no! I want to bring that whole thing up again.
Don't talk about
No, we've been
him.
down that road before
right.
many times.
Right.
President Harding, how'd you get in politics? Why?
Well, I made a transition into politics. In some ways, like you did. I first ran for an office I never should have run for. I wasn't destined to win anyway. And looking back on it, what was I thinking? But I ran for Marion County Auditor in 1895.
Okay.
That was the first office.
That was first office.
There you go.
And I think I was goaded into it. People were, Harding supporters and the staff and Florence were thinking, you'd be good at that. Yeah, you should run for public office. You'd be excellent in a public office. And I believed them and ran, and I was soundly defeated, which shouldn't have been a shock because Marion County in 1885 was overwhelmingly Democratic. I was running as a Republican and was just pounded. So I thought that was the end of it. But those voices kept after me. Florence and one of the things that I was doing as a newspaper editor was doing editorials supporting Republican candidates, whatever they were, and that got people's attention. Not that they thought I was a great politician or anything, but they thought, well, this is somebody who's interested in politics. Here's somebody who cares about civic duty and wants good for the community, and so that's sort of how it happened. Anyway, in 1899, I was nominated and ran for state senator from the 13th district, which is Marion, Logan, Hardin, and Union counties, and I served 2 two-year terms. And then that was the first time a 13th district senator and for Ohio had won 2 terms. Well, that gave me some confidence that, this is, there might be a future here. One thing led to another. I ran for lieutenant governor and lost. I ran for governor in 1910 against Judson Harmon. I lost that one too. But I ran for the U.S. Senate in 1914 and was elected to the Senate, and that was the path to the presidency.
And that's how you headed that way. We've got one more segment left in the program today, but I do want to remind people again, the 19th Annual United Heritage Hall, hosted by the Marion County Historical Society, will take place on Saturday, March the 29th, 5 to 8 p.m., Marion County Historical Society. Tickets are available at the door for $8. For more information, call the Historical Society, 740-387-4255. President Harding will not be there that night, but Florence will be there, and you can check out all of his items. Mary Ellen will be there that night in her museum. You can check out all the great items and pictures there. We're going to come back and talk a little bit about the presidency of Warren G. Harding and the 40th President of the United States time in Washington, D.C. Stay tuned. We'll be back right after this. Hey, Scott Spears here with the 40th President of the United States, Mary Ellen Withrow, and the 29th President of the United States, Warren G. Harding. And we are talking Marion history because the 19th annual A Night at Heritage Hall is coming up, hosted by the Marion County Historical Society, and I should say at the Marion County Historical Society, Saturday night, March the 29th, 5 to 8 p.m. Tickets are $8 at the door. For more information, call the Historical Society at 740-387-4255. Mary Ellen will be there that night in her museum, showing people all of the great things and artifacts that are in that museum. And President Harding is busy that night, but Florence will be there showing items that pertain to President Harding. Okay, President Harding, the presidency, your time as president, what are you most proud of?
Well, I think there are a number of accomplishments, and I can get into those. But I think what I'm most proud of were the opportunity to dedicate some important memorials and monuments. I dedicated the Lincoln Memorial and also presided at the dedication of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. Those were both extremely solemn occasions. Once in a lifetime doesn't even begin to describe it. It's a monumental honor, really, to be able to be involved with those kinds of events. So those stick with me for sure. A couple other things that I think are legacies. Balance the federal budget. That hadn't happened in a long time. Not everybody gets excited about that, but some things that are a little bit more mainstream. In 1920, if you wanted to fly an airplane, you just hopped in an airplane and took off. There was no licensing requirement, there was no training requirement. If you wanted to open up an airport, an airfield, you just mowed the grass and put up a couple lights and said you're an airfield. There was no federal regulation or state regulation of aviation. And aviation was growing by leaps and bounds, and yet seemed like it was one accident after another just waiting to happen. So I formed the Federal Aeronautical Board, which later became the FAA, that provided some oversight over this growing and important industry. Another was the radio industry, which also had no regulation in 1920. If you wanted to open up a radio station, you put up a tower, put a transmitter on it, boom, you're on the air. You picked your own frequency, you picked your own hours of operation, and what was happening was radio stations were stomping all over each other with conflicting frequencies, and it was just turning into chaos. So formed a federal radio board that later would become the FCC to begin to provide some federal oversight and organization of this emerging industry. So those were two things. I think the third was the biggest legacy was we were right at the end of the Great War. We had soldiers returning from Europe with horrific injuries, no place for them to go to be treated. What do? Go to the family doctor when you've got mustard gas burns? Nobody was prepared to deal with these kinds of things. So I formed the Veterans Bureau with the purpose of building hospitals and clinics and also being a central clearinghouse for veterans' benefits, which up to that time were scattered across 14 different government entities. And if you were a veteran coming back from Europe, you had to navigate all that by yourself. So the Veterans Bureau, which later would become the Veterans Administration, I think is probably the most lasting thing that I was involved with as president.
Mary Ellen, what sticks out as your time as Treasurer of the United States? What are your big accomplishments?
Well, it started out, the first thing that we worked on was the state quarters program. And there was a lot of criticism about it. They were afraid that one of the states would embarrass the government, and that state was South Carolina with the independent flag. And so they finally passed the law that said whatever the state chose had to be approved by the Secretary of the Treasury. And so then they all agreed on it. We all agreed on everything with the state quarters program, and it was a huge success. The government likes to make money on its money, and they made a lot of money on the state quarters program. And then we were redesigning the currency, which hadn't been redesigned since 1928. And there was so much work put into that with the Secret Service and all of the decisions that had to be made. And so then that's when they made the pictures of the presidents large on the money. And as far as I can remember, that went pretty smoothly, although I went out and talked about all of the things to look for on the currency, to look for the threads, the red and blue threads, which were already in the currency before I got there. And then they put a lot of other things into the currency to protect it. There was things put into the collars of the presidents on the bills that would say something, usually pertaining to that particular bill. And so that took a lot of work, and we released the $100 bill on the same day all over the world. And that was a job for the Secret Service, and they stored money where they were really worried about it, but it all worked out just fine. And I cannot remember how many times I said, you can still have your old money. Your old money will still be good, because we were afraid of riots, and there's 2/3 of our currencies outside of the United States, and so there's a lot of people with money under their mattresses in other countries. And then the other thing that I worked on was Sacagawea. Congress told me one day that we had to do away with the dollar bill and create a new dollar coin. Well, when I became U.S. Treasurer, we had so many Susan B. Anthonys, I thought we'd never get rid of all of them. But we did. The metros used them, and there were more metros being created during that time period, and all of a sudden, the Susan B. Anthonys were all gone. We had to make more before the Sacagawea was ready. And the Sacagawea coin was created, and they had everything on the computer for people to vote on. They had all about 10 designs that were on the computer, and people could vote. And one woman won the top 5, and that was Glenna Goodacre, and she is the mother-in-law to Harry Connick Jr. And so we had this ceremony out on the lawn of the White House on I can't remember the day, but it was a fabulous day, and we had all the Indian tribes represented, and the Indian tribes sat in a circle and beat their drums, and the chiefs danced down the aisle, and Hillary Clinton was in charge of the event, and it was just a wonderful day.
Mary Ellen, what do you think, being from Marion, Ohio, being from the Midwest, prepared you or helped you in your trek as county treasurer, state treasurer, treasurer of the United States?
Well, I must say a lot of people helped me. And I think, I think the fact that we were doing things that were very positive, and I really enjoyed that. I think today we're having a little problem with things being positive, and it makes it very hard. But I really enjoyed being U.S. Treasurer because they invited me to everything.
Got to go everywhere.
I did, and I went.
Yeah, and you went. Who was the most important person you met, or the one that meant the most to you?
Well, I just really liked the King Henry of Norway. First of all, he was very handsome.
Good-looking guy.
Yes, a good-looking guy. And when I walked in the room, he had a dollar bill with my name on it. They wanted me to sign it right away.
Now that's something when the King of Norway is waiting for you to come sign his money.
Yes, yeah, he was all set for it. And we went from Finland to Norway at, I think we were going 90 miles an hour. It was quite a trip, and we were in just a car. We didn't fly, and it was exciting.
When you're with the King of Norway and he's asking for your autograph on the money, does it ever flash? Here I am, Mary Ellen from Marion, Ohio. And now I'm here with the King of Norway.
Well, the thing was, he had said I couldn't take his picture. And I thought, well, maybe I have to say I won't sign your money unless you let me take your picture. But I didn't do that. I thought I hadn't better do that. Yeah.
Little bargaining chip.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bargaining chip. President Harding, you talked about a lot of celebrities who came through your campaign and White House. But a lot of people are very interested in your wife, Florence Harding. Tell us about her. Tell us who she was. A lot of people say without her, there would have been no you. Any truth to that?
Well, I think that's true. I think somebody asked Florence once, "What are your hobbies?" And she said, "My hobby is my husband." And that's true. She put a lot of effort into anything that I was doing. Florence has always been my greatest supporter. And Florence is the kind of person that's a little hard to get to know. She has a little bit of an edge to her. I think it's due to her upbringing with a very strict father. But she's one of the kindest, sweetest, most giving people that you'd ever meet once you get to know her. She has kind of a stern look, and I think that puts people off. But that's not the real Florence. The real Florence under there is kind and giving and smart to the point of being shrewd. A wonderful hostess. When we're hosting all of these events at the Harding home, people are coming in by the thousands, the tens of thousands, for front porch speeches and all. And Florence is in the background, hosting receptions and overseeing food service for the press corps and passing out recipe cards. By the way, she passed out the waffle recipe. That's their famous waffle.
Well, there we go. Now, what are the odds of that?
It was a campaign tool. It was one of many. But she was behind me 100%. She was truthfully the business brains behind the Marion Star. As I learned in my ill-fated insurance career, numbers were not my strong suit. I needed support with that. Words are gems, and I'm good with those. But numbers, I'm out of my league. Florence handled that and did a beautiful job. She caught a little heat in public, I think, because it became known that she used the services of a clairvoyant, Madame Marcia. Now, Madame Marcia in Washington was a fortune teller, and before you scoff at it, you realize that she had a loyal following. She had this uncanny ability to see things coming down the road in the future that nobody could explain. But her clientele were state senators, Supreme Court justices, cabinet members who trusted the advice that Madame Marcia gave. Well, Florence believed Madame Marcia had something to tell her, and Madame Marcia did. She said, Warren Harding will not serve out his first term. He won't survive it.
Well, take that into consideration.
Yeah, and I said, well, that's just poppycock. I've never felt better. But nonetheless, that's what she told Florence.
So that, you know what, look in history and take that for what you will. That's very, very interesting. Now, because of the way journalism is, President Harding, you ran the Marion Star, owned the Marion Star. The Marion Star Creed, do you have that with you?
I do.
I want President Harding to read this because I think this is very important with the state of journalism where we are now. Well, I'll let President Harding find this. What we do know about President Harding, the night of the election when he won President of the United States, he was listening to the radio. First president to do that back in those days at the Harding home right here in Marion. Mary Ellen, I wanted to ask you, when you won your first term as state treasurer against Buck Reinhardt, where were you on election night and what was it like?
I was in a hotel in Columbus with a lot of people. And it was a huge crowd, and Bucky Reinhardt was on the floor just above me.
Oh, you're both at the same hotel?
Mm-hmm. We were in the same hotel with our parties, and I remember it was just so busy and so frustrating, really, just trying to find out what's going on with the big crowd and everything in the room.
How did you feel going into that day? Because
I didn't know what was going to happen, but my staff said they thought I was going to win, and I said, well, you should have told me.
How did you get the word that you had won?
It was when the counts were coming in.
Did somebody tell you, or were you watching?
Yeah, somebody told me. Of course, we knew, where everything was coming from, and we knew what was important and what wasn't. But and we had everybody that was there was very involved with me in the campaign. Norman was there and was always so supportive. The president was talking about his wife. My husband was very, very supportive of me in everything I did, and I always think about that because it means so much. Yeah.
When he found out that you had won, do you remember what he said or how he reacted that night?
I don't really remember, and I don't understand why. But I remember my daughter she had a baby with her. It was Emily. She had just had Emily, and she was so excited. In fact, two of my daughters went up and looked in on Buck Reinhardt to see what he was doing.
see what was going up at his party.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they came back down and said, he's really upset.
That he was. Did he call you that night to concede?
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
No, I don't remember that he did. He said some nasty things about me.
Do you remember what you said to the crowd that night when you found out that you had won?
Well, I don't really remember. I thanked everybody for everything they did because I had an awful lot of people helping me, and they'd walked miles and passed out stuff, and they worked so hard. And and I was just so proud of everybody. I had a tough time on my second time as state treasurer against the guy from Cleveland that he was I had a primary. I was the only one on the Democratic ticket that had a primary, and I was a little ticked about that. And the guy was from Toledo, and his brother was in the Marion penitentiary here.
Well, that's...
I mean, it was, things are just wild in a campaign.
When you go back and think about it.
Yeah, they are.
Before I get to the Marion Star Creed here, I do want to talk a little bit about Norman here, your husband, for so many years. So over 70 years, you guys were married.
73.
73 years, my goodness. Yeah. When he found out that you had gotten the job as Treasurer of the United States,
oh, yeah.
How happy was he?
Wait, there's this picture hanging on my wall at home. You should see his face. You can just tell that he's just beaming. He's holding the Bible.
Yeah. Well, that's it. When we went around to the schools, what was interesting, when we played the video of you being sworn in, of course people pay attention to the vice president, and of course people are paying attention to you. But nobody's got a bigger smile in that room than your husband, standing right there.
Right.
Well, what does that mean to you?
Oh, that means he's very, very proud.
Yeah.
And he would help me with things that were very difficult. He would make some statement to me that would just make it all go away. The plane dealer was running all these articles on me, and he said, "You're going to have to get on your alligator suit."
He was definitely your biggest fan.
Oh, he was, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
President Harding, the Marion Star Credo, what was this?
All right. Well, I understand, in this era of journalism, there was something called yellow journalism or muckraking, where it was popular for publishers to cater to the lowest common denominator and fill their publications with innuendo, outright fabrications, lies, just to create a stir, because it sold papers. Same reason it does today. It was clear that the Marion Star was not going to do this, and to put together the Marion Daily Star Creed, which was a large poster on the wall, and encouraged folks on the staff to memorize it. Here it is. Remember, there are two sides to every question. Get them both. Be truthful. Get the facts. Mistakes are inevitable, but strive for accuracy. I would rather have one story exactly right than 100 half wrong. Be decent. Be fair. Be generous. Boost. Don't knock. There's good in everybody. Bring out the good and never needlessly hurt the feelings of anybody. In reporting a political gathering, give the facts. Tell the story the way it is, not the way you would like to have it. Treat all parties alike. If there's any politics to be played, we'll play it in our editorial columns. Treat all religious matter reverently. If it can possibly be avoided, never bring embarrassment to an innocent man, woman, or child by telling of the misdeeds or misfortune of a relative. Don't wait to be asked, but do it without asking, and above all, be clean and never let a dirty word or suggestive story get into type. I want this paper to be conducted that it can go into any home without destroying the innocence of any child.
You know what's interesting about that? But President Harding, you mostly wrote editorials. Now, not that they were untoward, but, not... Editorials by nature are not necessarily factual. They're just opinion. Opinion. Why, do we know why you did mostly editorials?
Well, I didn't do mostly editorials. I was chief cook and bottle washer, and I wrote a lot of the stories, a lot of the content day to day.
Why do those become your closely associated. Most people say President Harding wrote those editorials. And by the way, Bob Mason at WMRN did the same thing.
He did do the same
he?
thing.
Yeah.
Yes. And because I saw the role that a community newspaper could take as a platform, as a conscience of the community. And the editorial would give me the opportunity to put out an idea that could, journalists would say, galvanize public opinion. Meaning, it crystallizes some opinion around it. It starts to gather some moss as a rolling stone, and it gets a little bigger and a little bigger. And then things start to happen. The streets of Marion get paved. A political candidate starts to get some traction. If there's some misdeed that's happening in Marion politics that needs to be called out in an objective way, well, then that's what an editorial does. And I think it's fascinating that in the 1920 campaign for president, we had a Republican publisher of a newspaper running against a Democratic publisher of a newspaper, Cox in Dayton, who owned Cox newspapers.
From Ohio,
what are the odds of something like that happening?
Yeah.
It's very, very strange. Mary Ellen, you talked earlier about your ups and downs with the media and things that they would print from time to time. When you hear the initial idea of what the Marion Star was to be in the words and thoughts of Warren Harding, what's that make you think about it? Certainly, that's not really how newspaper journalism has evolved over the years.
How, you mean?
Well, because certainly everything not written about you when you were running was not accurate.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
But the Marion Star was very supportive.
Yes. Nice articles in there.
Yes. They got upset with me when I was in office, and I didn't call back and talk to them because the Secret Service told me not to. They got a little upset with me there, but normally they did a fine job. Yeah.
Which paper was the most difficult?
Oh, the Columbus Dispatch,
which was owned by the Wolf.
John Wolfe.
Yeah.
And I took the money out of his bank because it had been in his bank since 1923, and moved it to Huntington, and so he was the only one that didn't endorse me. The only newspaper that didn't endorse me. All the rest of the newspapers endorsed me. Yeah.
Was there when you became treasurer of the United States, did they run a nice article then?
Yeah.
Yeah. So by that point,
they did.
Yeah, time had moved on.
And the guy that worked for them, they sent me flowers once a week.
Oh, really?
Yes, until they stopped, but it went on for a long time. I think they were in the habit of doing that for Gertrude Donahue.
Your predecessor.
And they just kept doing it, and then, I don't know, it went on for, it's more than a year, and he said, I'm going to have to stop the flowers. I said, that's okay. I said, I've really enjoyed them.
It's, we're just scratching the surface here with some great stories. And I want to let everybody know that the 19th annual A Night at Heritage Hall is coming up, hosted by the Marion County Historical Society at the Marion County Historical Society on Saturday, March the 29th, 5 to 8 p.m. Tickets are available at the door for $8. For more information, call the Historical Society at 740-387-4255. President Harding's not able to be there that night. He will be with the Senate, but Mrs. Harding will be there showing his items, and Mary Ellen will be in her museum at the Historical Society on that night, amongst a whole lot of other things. Thank you so both of you so much for coming here today. It's fun to sit in between you both.
Well, it's an honor to be with you, Mary Ellen.
Yes, and you. Yes, I always like being around the president.
That's exactly right. Scott Spears heading for the dugout.